Hello and welcome to the last lesson on this course. In this lesson we're going to paint our illustrations, basing ourselves on everything we learnt in the theory. As you'll soon see, this process is a lot of fun. It will help you expand your horizons and get out of your comfort zone, learning new ways to paint. So let's go! Here we have some photos I like and that I want to use as references for my painting. I like the colours and the atmosphere, and I think they adapt well to what I'm looking for. With a saturated red brush, I'll make a note of elements I'm most interested in. On a new layer, I'm going to draw 6 horizontal rectangles where I'll make some sketches based on the previous photos. I'm doing 6 because I think that's enough for a good brainstorm, but you could do more if you like. A brainstorm is an investigative process, in this case before an illustration, but you can carry this out in any project for any field. We'll do lots of different sketches to find the elements or compositions that we like the most and integrate them until we get our final design. It's a fun process in which we can draw things that we might not consider including at the beginning, but later we could decide we like them and we'll use them for the final design. Do your own brainstorming whenever you're creating an illustration. So I'm going to draw some mountains, I'll do other landscapes with the sea, others with an open and clear sky, some with clouds. Later I'll decide which ones I like the best. The black that I'm using on the sketches shows the elements that are in the foreground. This way I can understand the landscape as soon as I see it. With a red brush, I'll draw a tick next to the sketches that I like and a cross next to the ones that are not really convincing. This doesn't necessarily mean that I won't use them. You can always change your mind. If I put a question mark next to a sketch, then that means that I'm not sure. Just go making your own notes depending on how you feel about each sketch. Now what I'm going to do is merge the layers and erase the designs that I'm not interested in. Duplicate the layer to save the previous ones if at any moment I go back and revise them. Now I'll arrange the sketches that I liked so I can see them properly and make a decision. As you can see, I have different horizon lines and different skies. I'm showing you which horizon lines coincide with others. This way I can decide which one to use. I'll make a note of everything in the corner so I don't forget. I want there to be lots of sea and clouds visible too. I might use some mountains, but a lot smaller than I had originally thought. Great, so now I've decided on my definitive design. Now I have to transfer that to the canvas. A rough sketch is enough, as we'll solve most of the painting with strokes of colour. If you need your drawing to be more defined, that's fine, but I recommend that you go straight in with the colour just to try out new ways of working. You might find this new way more comfortable. Many artists work like this, and then they define the details later. Others first define the line and then apply the colour. Any process is valid, as long as you go from general to specific and never the other way around. I'm going to draw a composition grid. In the corners of the central square, you should place the most important elements of the scene. Western reading goes from left to right and up down. You can use these movements to tell a story within your illustration. I'll set the horizon line in the bottom line of the grid, a low but well-composed horizon to give our illustration a sense of openness and space. I'll also add some mountains in the distance. I don't want them to be too big, so our focus stays on the sea and the sky. I want the clouds to go towards the left and draw out attention to the bottom left-hand corner of the central square. This is where I'm going to draw a sailing boat. I'll make the sketch bigger so it fits the canvas. You don't need to draw it again if you don't want. I'm going to remove the references from this canvas to a new one so we have more room to paint. This way I can adjust the size and move them around my workspace or minimize them if I don't need them. You need to make your space as comfortable as possible to work in. I'll place all these layers into a new group and then I can draw my attention to the color layers. Again, keep things as simple and comfortable as you can. Keep your workspace tidy to relax your mind while you're painting. I'm going to create a new layer underneath our pencil and apply a base color to the scene. The tone I'll use will be more or less the main hue I'd like for the atmosphere, even if I change the colors later. Don't worry too much about these previous steps, but just remember the ideas you have for the illustration. Gradually we'll reach our objective. Don't forget to name your layers so you don't get lost. I'm going to select a rectangular painterly style brush to apply the basic colours to the landscape, but you can use whatever brush you find most comfortable. I do recommend not using one that's too strange, best something simple so the colours are even. For this step, I don't like brushes that are too abrupt or bold as they don't really allow us to blend the tones. You can lower the opacity of the brush if that helps you mix the colours. As I paint, I'm defining the direction the elements of the illustration are moving in. Painting in the direction of the volumes helps you to respect the shapes correctly and not to have to start erasing later. The colours I'm using are saturated and warm. I'm thinking about a sunset, so the colours can't be too cold or flat. We usually see warm colours in a sunset. Maybe the coolest colours we observe might be purple or violet. Think about what time of day or year your illustration is set in and search for references that show the appropriate hues or colours. You can always experiment with colour, but be careful when applying warm or saturated colours to a sad or grey scene and vice versa. The colours of your painting should make sense and relate to what you want to tell. For the tones of the clouds, I'm going to use a specially designed cloud brush. As you can see, it produces a cloudy or blurry effect. However, be careful when using these strange or dramatic brushes in these initial phases. What's important now is for our drawing to be correct in shape and colour. Later we can worry about using other resources to add our final details. To simulate these clouds or atmospheric effects, I'll lower the opacity considerably and increase the size of the brush quite a lot. Select the hues that are mixed with the original colours with the eyedropper and softly paint on top. Like this, the colours blend together and the achieved effect is very interesting. Creating a good atmosphere is crucial for our illustration to work. I'm painting in the mountains with a darker tone as they're against the light of the sun. Just like every illustration, you need to establish a light source from the beginning. In this case, the light source is the sun, which is behind the sailing boat. That's why any element that's against the sunlight will look very dark to us. You can also base your light source on a photo and copy it, but bear in mind that if you don't specify the source, you might start to mix the light of one photo with another where the light source is different. So think about this carefully before you start painting. As you can see, the water must reflect the colours from the sky, so we can gradually add those hues with a soft brush that has a low opacity. That way we'll mix the colours bit by bit, achieving a lovely effect on the water. For the clouds, I think it's interesting to choose really dark tones and some really light ones. Although they're light, clouds have a very defined shape. They are masses with very random but clear shapes, so we need to think about what shapes we want our clouds to have and paint the areas of light and shadow along with the main source of light, the sun. One way of making the cloud shapes is to use a brush designed for painting clouds, make it big and lower the opacity. Select colours that you like and loosely apply strokes to the sky in the direction you want the clouds to go. Using this technique, you might get some interesting shapes for your clouds. You can add additional elements to the scene that work well with the initial composition. For example, I'm going to add more rock surface on the right to compensate the visual weights. I have a very strong element on the left, which is the light source, and the boat, so a secondary element on the right is a good idea. See how I've placed it in an area that is hardly lit, and if you squint a little, it blends into the background. That's why it's a secondary element. It doesn't take any attention away from your main element, the sailing boat. Usually your own intuition will guide you in your illustration. There might be times where you think you need certain colours in some parts of the drawing, or that you're missing elements in others. The brain quickly realises that something is wrong in the composition. Maybe our eye notices the lack of harmony.
If your intuition is telling you that you need to add or remove anything, then revise the fundamentals of colour and composition and find what it is you need to change. If you need to add more tones to the water, select colours from the sky and, as I said before, use a soft brush with a low opacity to blend in with the tones you already have. I've decided to keep a yellowy brown colour for the water to add to the richness of the colour range. This is more of an artistic license on my part, as if you look at photos, water usually reflects the same colours as the sky. If you do this, then your water will look clearer with a mirror-like effect. Remember that water's waves go in a horizontal direction if the water's calm, so your colours should blend and merge in that direction. You could add the waves later with some brush effects. We could also paint them now, but I prefer to do it later so I can show you some of the tricks. If there are very flat areas in the water, you can add soft lines that indicate the direction of the water. Use references if you're unsure how to represent certain elements, like this, or the clouds, or plants. In the end, the best is always to observe nature. It is interesting to see how other painters solve these issues, but I recommend that first you observe the real images so you don't make the mistakes others might have made. Now I'm going to focus on the sunlight. With a soft brush, I'll choose my light tones and I'll extend the sun's rays, highlighting the boat. I'm consistently giving this element more strength and importance. This is the centre of our composition, and we should reinforce this with every element that we can. Subconsciously, our eyes will be directed to this element using these techniques. The rocks in the background behind the horizon were merged with the sky, and we don't really want this. I'm going to reinforce the idea of the backlight by painting them with a similar dark tone as the rocks on the side. You can always play around with very dark tones and light ones to practice this. I'm going to add a very intense light behind the boat to again illustrate what I just told you. This intense light against the darkness of the boat draws our eyes to it even more. Also, if you look at references, you'll notice that the sun has a strong white light in the middle, so we're also imitating reality as well as focusing the attention on our main element. We should see this light reflected in the water too, although slightly less intense. I'm going to add more light to the sails on the boat. The light of the sun hits it at the front, so it shouldn't be as dark as the rocks. Now our painting is more or less set out with lighting, shading and our chosen tones. We're going to use some quick tricks with the paintbrush to get that style we're looking for. What I'll do with this brush is select the already existing tones with the eyedropper and just break down the lines with the colour. See how some colours absorb others and the shapes start mixing with each other. Also, this type of brush and stroke makes new shapes that we could find useful. Now I'm going to paint all over the canvas with this brush to blend the tones in painterly style strokes. The brush stroke looks intentionally loose and fresh from the start, and the effect we obtain is quite convincing. Just be careful to not break the base that we have and respect the limits of each element. Use these tricks, but be careful not to ruin the work you've already done. Obviously, you need to do this on another layer. What I do is merge all the visible layers into one to continue working on it and go back when I need to. Always keep the previous step so you don't get lost if you ever want to go back on yourself. Keep breaking up the colours with this brush until you get what you want. With another brush, softer but with a similar stroke, I'll blend all the strokes I've done up to now. They're too abrupt and sometimes you can see the pattern in the brush stroke that repeats itself, and we don't want this. We want each stroke to look unique. So with the new brush and a low opacity, we'll mix in the tones with the background and break up the old strokes into new ones. In this phase, we can define new volumes that we obtain with the other brush and play around with these. For example, we might have found new waves or clouds that we like. So with this brush, you can define those new shapes and adapt them to your illustration. Sometimes small touches with the brush without dragging it can give us nice effects to make different textures. It all depends on the type of brush though. If the brush has a very defined texture, then we'll end up with big splodges. If, on the other hand, it's very soft or smoky, then it will blend the tones and strokes we made already to soften the scene. Choose what you think is interesting for each particular area or element and paint accordingly. This is a process of constantly investigating and experimenting. I encourage you to try out different things on new layers to find new and personal effects. As we painted with these brushes, we've achieved a much bolder looking sea. We've got some wild waves and I really like the effect. You can strengthen them with light and shading in specific areas to imitate the crest of the wave, for example. I'll also add this effect to other areas of the sea. The foam will have more light as the sun hits it first and also because of its material properties. So I recommend you use lighter tones for this. Observe the whole scene to correct any minor details that you don't like or that you need to soften. This step is important to polish the painting. Careful with those small details because when we paint digitally, we're not applying random brush strokes. They have a pattern and they can become repetitive. To finish up, I'm just going to define the ship a little bit more so it's not just a blob of colour. I'll make sure the perspective of the hull and the sails are correct and I'll apply different light tones depending on the light that hits each side. Finally, we'll blend in the ship slightly with the background to integrate it better into the scene. Use a soft brush with a low opacity to do this. And so our painterly style illustration is finished. I think the final result is lovely and very striking. Applying these types of strokes, we get the feeling that this was the idea from the beginning. You can experiment with different styles of painting or different artistic movements to expand your horizons and try out new techniques. I really hope you enjoyed this course, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!